Hello, and welcome to Talking About Tumors with Ryan and Ryan. I'm Ryan Holstead. I'm a practicing medical oncologist working at the University of Massachusetts in Worcester.
Hi, and I'm Ryan Quinn. I am also a practicing oncologist, also working at UMass in Worcester.
This is a podcast that Ryan and I got the idea of during the COVID pandemic, actually. I was completing my fellowship training in Canada at the time, and Ryan was working in New York. And given that we were quarantined on opposite sides of the border with one another, we would often have Zoom talks with one another going over individual tumor sites. During these, we would talk through the different clinical approach and scenarios for patients. At the time, there's very limited introductory podcasts, and we thought this may be a useful resource for other people entering the early stages of their training.
Being an oncology fellow in New York City, I spent a lot of my time commuting on the subway, so I really like to listen to podcasts, and I had been looking for an introductory oncology podcast to use to kind of prepare for the day and get more information about the specific cancer type that I was seeing. In internal medicine residency, we don't really get a lot of exposure to outpatient oncology, the nuances of different chemotherapy regimens, and the workup for just different cancers. So I was looking for a podcast that could help me navigate my way in the oncology field.
When we first started to develop this, the majority of the podcasts out there were expert consensus on usually kind of more complicated nuances approach to the topic. There was a very good podcast that's still ongoing called OncoPharm, which was looking at from a pharmacologic standpoint for oncology, and Plenary Session, which is an excellent podcast going into evidence appraisal and literature. However, bread and butter background for the first time you enter the clinic and approach the patients had very limited options out there. Since our initial start of this podcast, there have been two other podcasts that have emerged that do also help with this process. The Fellow on Call gives a very good detailed discussion on individual tumor sites, and Two OncDocs is also a great one, giving short, quick board review sessions.
So this podcast is definitely not a comprehensive board review course, so please do not use it for that, although it can give you some helpful tips for when you're seeing different cancers for the first time and going into those clinics for the first time. We do plan on updating the episodes because we know that the field of oncology is changing very rapidly, sometimes very frustratingly rapidly when you're trying to learn the fields, but we will go back and update the episodes as we go through.
We'll aim to balance the evidence background while going into the fundamentals of each individual disease site. Our podcast is available through our website, www.talkingabouttumors.com. We have a Twitter @TalkingTumors, and our email is talkingabouttumors@gmail.com. We encourage all feedback, reviews, and ratings of this podcast, as we're going to continue to try to update it and keep it relevant and useful to trainees working their way through this fascinating and ever-changing field.
If you want more details on some of the studies that we referenced during the podcast, feel free to go on the website because we list all of the studies that we talk about. Thanks for listening, and hope you guys enjoy the podcast.